Alright, I'm going to show you how to calibrate your CRX tachometer. Those of you who've done cluster swaps notice sometimes one tach will read a little different than another, or just over time your tach goes out. For this to work properly, you need a tach or a tachometer reading that is accurate so you can compare it to your tach out of your cluster. What I'm using is I have Honbeta S300, and S300 has its own tach readout that picks up differently than the tach signal, so it's usually pretty accurate. That, or you could get a aftermarket tach, like a aftermarket one, like a autometer or something that's reliable and trustworthy and temporarily wired up. What I've done here is I have two clusters. This is my old cluster here, my old tachometer. On the back, you'll see that I have, come on, focus. There you go. You'll see that I have wires ran to these three screws. These are the three screws that fasten through your tach to hold it into your cluster. Red there is positive, black is ground, the gray is the tach signal. You get your tach signal on a 91 CRX from the first pin. I ran it in behind and just plugged it in to my tach signal. And I just rigged up this quick cigarette lighter power source. It's a old plug for a cigarette lighter, wired up to give me a power source. This tach wasn't off very much. This one was actually pretty close to being on, but I wanted to experiment with this before I want to mess with my good one. My good one's a 9,500 RPM SIR tach that is off. At 1,000 RPM idle, it only reads about 500. And through up the RPM range, it's off as well. But the trick to adjusting these is, A, as I stated, get a reliable tach reading, either your ECU, like a Neptune or something, or get another tach and temporarily wire it up side by side. You can tie the other tach into the same signals. And then on the side of this, you're going to see two little pot switches. Using a flathead screwdriver and adjusting them actually changes the needle position at a given RPM. I haven't found which pot switch does which. In other words, I don't know which is the upper boundary limit and which is the lower boundary limit. I basically sat here and played with them both for probably a good 15-20 minutes, turning each one a little bit and a little on the other. They both seem to do about the same thing when you first turn them. The top one will when you turn it, will make the tach go up. The bottom one, when you turn it, will make the tach go up. When you turn them down, they both make the needle go down. But it's a combination of where they both end up being that ends up ultimately making your tach accurate. Like I said, this one wasn't that far off down low, but was about 500 RPM off up high. I have it adjusted now to where it's really, really close. In fact, it's close enough that I'm gonna let it alone, even though it's not I'm not going to use this anymore. This one was just my experiment one. I will now get out, after I'm done with this video, my good one and calibrate it. But I wanted to show you guys that it's possible to do. You simply take your tach out of your cluster itself. Very simple to pop apart a cluster. You probably find tutorials on the internet, but it's basically popping some clips around the edges, popping it off, and then there's a couple screws that hold this inside, from the back. And they're even labeled in here. Let me see if I can get this to zoom in here. Yeah, you see the IGN? That stands for ignition. That's 12 volts. Ground, GND, ground. And this one here is labeled signal. It's kind of in behind there, you can't really see it, but it says SIG for signal. And that's it. You basically wire it up, hold it here in your hand, get your screwdrivers, monkey with those two pot screws until you get the needle to read accurate. Now remember, just because you get it to read accurate at idle, or at 1 or 2,000 or even 3,000 RPM, doesn't mean it's still going to read accurate at 5, 6, 7 RPM, 6,000, 7,000 RPM. You have to play with all the different RPMs till you find the combination of the pot settings that give you the accurate tach, or as close to accurate as possible. I'll show you now that this one's pretty close to being accurate. Let me fire up my car and my laptop here. Okay, here we go. You see it's about 970 something, 980 something, and we're just under 1 here. Alright, so now we'll take this sucker up to about 3, right around 3. You see we're right around 3. Up to about 5. We're still off up there by about 200 RPM. My foot was fluctuating a little bit there, so it's not as bad as it looked, but you know, I could still sit here and play with it and get it a little bit better. But it was well over, you know, like I said, at least 500 RPM or more off before I started playing with it. So I definitely made it better, and if I sat here and played with it longer, I could probably get it perfect, but that's not the tack I'm worried about, so that's not the one I'm going to sit here and play with. Basically, I just wanted to do this short little video to show you all with CRXs that it's possible to calibrate your tack without having to run a ricey tack or an aftermarket tack, or even keep swapping clusters. Again, I don't know which pot switch is the upper boundary limit and which one's the lower boundary limit. You'll have to sit there and play with combinations of both until you get it right. But it can be done. I just improved that one there's upper RPM drastically. It was way off. Now I'm going to do my other one. So, hope this helps some people out there. I don't know if this will work in other Civics. I never tore apart a cluster in an EG or an Integra, but definitely works for the 91 CRX.